An unpleasant encounter. Ichthyander was in a very poor state indeed. His wound was still giving him pain, he was running a high temperature and was finding it hard to breathe with his lungs. But despite all this he had come to the rocks in the morning to meet Gutierrez. She came at noon, when the heat was overpowering. What with hot air and fine white dust, Ichthyander was breathing in gasps. He wanted Gutierrez to stay with him on the seashore, but she was in a hurry to go back. "Father's going away on business, so he wants me to stay in the shop," she said. "I will see you off then," he said, and they set out townward along the hot dusty road. Coming towards them, his head bent, was Olsen. Apparently preoccupied with something, he drew level and would have gone past them, had not the girl hailed him. "I must have a few words with him," Gutierrez said to Ichthyander, and then joined Olsen. They spoke in rapid undertones. The girl seemed to be trying to talk him into something. Ichthyander stood waiting a few paces away. "Well then, see you round midnight," he heard Olsen's voice. He shook the girl's hand and quickly went his way. When Gutierrez came back to Ichthyander's side, his face was flushed. He was on the point of speaking to her about Olsen but still could not find words. "I can't bear it," he began, gasping for air. "I must know. Olsen, you're hiding something from me. You're going to meet him tonight, aren't you? Do you love him?" Gutierrez took Ichthyander by his hand and looked at him gently. "Do you trust me?" she said. "I do. You know I love you." He had found the word at last. But I'm suffering." And he was too. He was suffering because of uncertainty and because at that moment a cruel pain was racking his sides. He was struggling for breath. The color had drained from his cheeks. "You look quite ill," the girl said in an anxious tone. "Do try and take yourself in hand. My dear boy, I didn't want to tell you everything, but to set your heart at rest I will. Listen to me." A man on horseback rushed past, then veered sharply round and rode up to the young couple. Ichthyander looked up and saw a swarthy man, no longer in his youth, with a pointed mustache and goatee. He was sure he had seen the man somewhere. In town? No. Yes, that time on the shore. The horseman was tapping his shiny boot with the riding crop as he gave Ichthyander a vile look and then held his hand out to Gutierrez. Grasping her hand, he suddenly lifted it up to kiss. "Caught you," he guffawed, and releasing the hand of the frowning Gutierrez, he went on in a bantering voice edged with truculence. "Now is it at all seemly for a young bride to be walking about with a young man just on the eve of her wedding?" Gutierrez flushed in anger, but he did not give her time to speak. "Father's been waiting for you. I'll be back there in an hour's time." Ichthyander did not hear the last words. All of a sudden everything had gone dark in front of his eyes. There was a lump in his throat, his breathing had nearly stopped. He felt he could no longer stay on land. "So you, after all, were deceiving me," he managed to utter with lips that had turned blue. He wanted to speak, to voice his indignation, to find out the whole truth, but the pain in his sides was so unbearably acute that he suddenly knew he was going to lose consciousness. Ichthyander tore away towards the sea and dropped into the water from the cliff top. Gutierrez cried out and staggered. Then she rushed to Pedro Zorita. "Quick, save him." But Zorita did not budge. "It's not in my habit to interfere with someone who wants to drown himself," he said smugly. Gutierrez ran seawards. It looked as if she, too, wanted to throw herself into the sea. Zorita dug his heels into his horse, caught up with the girl, seized her by the shoulders, lifted her up onto the saddle and galloped off along the road. "It's not my habit to interfere with those who do not interfere with me. It's better that way. Try and be sensible, Gutierrez." Gutierrez never said a word. She had fainted. It was only at her father's shop that she at last came to. "Who was that young man?" Pedro asked. Gutierrez looked at Zorita with a loathing she did not want to disguise. "Let me go," she said. Zorita frowned. Well, nothing in it, probably, he thought. And then her hero has jumped into the sea. Couldn't do better. And Tourney. Ing to the shop he shouted, "Hey, Baltasar." Baltasar ran out. "Here, take your daughter. And thank me that you're seeing her at all. I saved her." She nearly jumped into the sea after a young man with plenty of good looks. "This is the second time I've saved your daughter's life and she's still shy in my company." "Well, I'm going to see it stop soon." He guffawed. "Be back in an hour. Remember our deal?" Baltasar was bowing servilely. Zorita spurred his horse on and galloped away. Father and daughter entered the shop. Gutierrez sank onto a stool and buried her face in her hands. Baltasar shut the door and, pacing the floor, began speaking in an agitated manner. But nobody was listening to him. He might just as well have been speaking to the dried-up crabs and half-moons lying on the shelves. He's jumped into the sea, the poor boy, the girl thought, Ichthyonder's face floating in front of her mind's eye. First Olsen, then that stupid encounter with Zarita. How dared he call me a bride? Everything is lost. Gutierrez wept. She was sorry for Ichthyonder. Simple and shy, he was a cut above all those vain and arrogant young men she had seen in the city. What shall I do? She thought. Throw myself into the sea like Ichthyonder? Put an end to it all? Baltasar was saying. Do you understand what it means, Gutierrez? It means ruin. Everything you see in this shop belongs to Zarita. What belongs to me won't make up 1/10 of it. All my pearls I receive from Zarita on commission. He's got me where he wants me. If you turn him down this time he'll take away what's his and stop doing business with me. And that means ruin. Complete ruin. Be a good girl, pity your old father. Go on, why don't you say, and marry him? But I won't, Gutierrez said sharply. To hell with it, cried Baltasar, his blood up. In that case Zarita himself will make you do it. And the old Indian went into his laboratory, slamming the door shut behind him. Fighting octopuses. Once in the sea, Ichthyonder forced himself to forget all the misfortunes that had befallen him on land. After the hot and dusty land, the cool water was all the more refreshing and soothing. The shooting pain ceased. His breathing was once again deep and even. What he wanted now was to relax and forget. But Ichthyonder had an active disposition. Idleness could not help him to forget. He tried to think of something to do. On dark nights he was fond of diving from a high cliff, deep enough to touch the bottom. But it was just past midday and above his head black bottoms of fishing boats were tracing their courses in the water. I know what I'll do. I'll put the cave in order, Ichthyonder told himself. In the sheer wall of a cliff in the gulf there was a cave with a finely arched entrance, giving a grandstand view of the submarine plane gently sloping into the ocean depths. For a long Ichthyonder had had an admiring eye for the spot. But to settle in it he had first to oust its lawful occupants, numerous families of octopuses. Armed with his long, slightly curved knife, Ichthyonder swam up to the cave and stopped at the mouth, not daring to enter. Then he thought he would tease the enemy into the open. From his previous visits he remembered seeing a long harpoon lying near a capsized boat close by. Finding it, he took up his position at the cave mouth and began poking about in it. The octopuses came to life, indignant at the intrusion. Tentacles crept into view in the archway. Gingerly they approached the harpoon, but Ichthyonder snatched it away before they could get a good hold on it. The play went on for a few minutes, until dozens of tentacles were writhing and swaying like a snaky-headed gorgon in the archway. At last an enormous old octopus whose patience had snapped decided to teach the cheeky intruder a lesson. It squeezed itself outside and, moving its tentacles in a threatening way and changing its color, slowly bore down upon the enemy. Ichthyonder swam to the side, dropped his harpoon and braced himself for battle. He knew full well from experience that a man with his 2 arms stands little chance in fighting an octopus with its 8 long powerful tentacles unless he goes straight for its body. So he let the octopus come quite near, then suddenly lunged forward, into the very center of the tangle of tentacles, close to the mollusk's parrot-like beak. This always catches an octopus tunawares. And as always it took this octopus no less than 4 seconds to bring the tips of its tentacles in. But by that time Ichthyonder had already, in a single swift unerring movement, slashed the beast's body in 2, severing its motor nerves. And the huge tentacles, already all round him, went limp and dropped down. That's one. He picked up his harpoon again. This time 2 octopuses swam out, one of them coming straight to tackle Ichthyonder while the other tried to outflank him and attack him from the rear. Things were taking a more dangerous turn. Undaunted, however, Ichthyonder attacked the octopus in front of him, but before he was through with it the other one had a tentacle round his neck. The young man swiftly cut it off at his very neck, turned round and started to hack off the other tentacles. When, at last, the mutilated octopus was dropping slowly to the bottom, Ichthyonder returned to the first and finished it off. 3, Ichthyonder counted. But now he had to beat a temporary retreat. A whole troop of octopuses had emerged from the cave mouth, barely visible in the blood-stained water. In that brown murky haze the odds would be heavy against him, for the enemy could easily find him by touch. He swam a little way off, to the clear water, and killed there a fourth octopus which had unwisely ventured outside the bloody cloud. The battle lasted on and off for several hours. When finally the last octopus had been killed and the water had cleared, Ichthyander saw numerous dead bodies and severed tentacles still writhing all round him. He then entered the cave. A few small octopuses were still there, the size of a fist, with tentacles no thicker than his finger. Ichthyander wanted to kill them off but then felt sorry for them. "I'll try and tame them," he thought. Couldn't find better guards for the place. The question of guarding the place settled, Ichthyander went over to fixing up his new abode with some furniture. From his cottage he fetched a marble-topped table with 4 sturdy iron legs and 2 Chinese vases. He placed the table in the middle of the cave, put the vases on it, filled them with earth and planted some marine flowers. Some of the earth was washed away and writhed up in 2 columns of smoke for some time, then the water cleared. Only the flowers went on swaying slightly as if stirred by a gentle breeze. There was a ledge in one of the walls, a sort of natural stone bench. The new master of the cave stretched himself out on it and looked with approval at the result of his labors. Under water the stone bench felt quite soft. It was a strange submarine room with a table and 2 Chinese vases on it. Numerous curious fish came to attend the queer housewarming. They darted in and out between the table legs, swam to the flowers in the vases as if for an appreciative sniff, and even whisked between Ichthyander's head and the arm on which it rested. A marble bullhead looked in at the entrance, waved its tail in puzzled alarm and swam off. A large crab crawled across the white sand, raised and lowered a pincer as if saluting the master of the house, and settled down under the table. Ichthyander was finding it all great fun. As he lay there he thought of more things to beautify his new home with. Out at the entrance I'll plant the most beautiful marine flowers there are. I'll strew the floor with pearls and place shells at the foot of the walls. If only Gutierrez could see my submarine room. But she's deceiving me. Or is she? After all, she wanted to tell me something about Olsen but had no chance to. Ichthyander frowned. Then the stillness of the place began to crowd in on him. He felt alone again. Why can't people live underwater like me? He thought. I wish father had come back. I'll ask him. He wanted to show his new home to somebody. Anybody. Suddenly he remembered leading. Good old leading. Ichthyander took up his winding shell, surfaced and blew through it. Soon he could hear the familiar snorting. When the dolphin had joined him, Ichthyander embraced his friend. Come with me, leading, he said, I'll show you my new home. And you've never before seen a table or a Chinese vase. Then, ordering the dolphin to follow him, he dived down. But the dolphin turned out to be a troublesome guest. Big and awkward, it raised such a commotion in the cave that the vases tottered and all but fell down. Then it managed to brush a leg of the table with its nose, overturning the table and sending the vases to the floor. On land that would have been the end of them, here nothing had happened, save for the frightened crab, which scurried out sidewise with an amazing speed. How awkward you are, Ichthyander said as he pushed the table to the back of the cave and picked up the vases. Then he went to the dolphin's side and put both his arms round him. Pipe, stay with me here, leading, he said. But soon the dolphin began shaking its head and showing other signs of unrest. It could not stay underwater for long spells. It needed air. So with one powerful thrust of its fins the dolphin swam outside and up to the surface. Even leading can't live with me underwater, Ichthyander thought sadly, alone again. Only fish, but they are shy and silly. And he sank back on his stone couch. The sun had set, it was dark in the cave. The water in it rose and fell a little with a soothing effect. Soon, tired with the day's excitement and work, Ichthyander was lulled to sleep. A new friend. Olsen was on board a big launch, looking over the rail into the water. The sun had just risen, but it was already high enough for its slanting rays to pierce like blue-tinted searchlights to the very bottom of the shallow cove. A few Indians were crawling over the white sand seafloor. Every now and then they came up for a good breath of air and then plunged back. Olsen kept an eye on them. It was hot, in spite of the early hour. By and by he felt he could do with a dip or two, undressed quickly and dived overboard. Olsen had never done any pearl diving before, but he soon found that he could stay underwater longer than the professionals. So he joined the divers, thrilled to be doing something that was quite new to him. Back at the bottom for a third time Olsen saw 2 Indians, working side by side, suddenly jump up and swim desperately to the surface as if a pack of sharks or sawfish were after them. Olsen fronted round. Swiftly coming to him with strong frog-wise thrusts was a queer silver-scaled creature, half man, half frog, with enormous bulging eyes and webbed paws. Before Olsen had time to rise from his knees, the monster was near him and holding him by his arm with its frog-like paw. Scared as he was, Olsen realized that the creature had a human face, whose good looks were only marred by a pair of bulging, glittering eyes. The queer creature, apparently forgetting all about being underwater, began speaking to him. Olsen could not hear a word. He only saw lips moving in speech. With its two front paws, the creature had a tight grip on Olsen's arm. Olsen pushed against the bottom and went up, using his free arm. The monster trailed behind, not letting go of his other arm. On surfacing, Olsen clung to the gunwale with his free hand, hooked it with his leg, clambered into the boat and, with one strong push, sent the half-man, half-frog, splashing into the water. The Indians in the boat had jumped into the water and were swimming shorewards for all they were worth. Ichthyander swam back to the boat. "Listen, Olsen," he said in Spanish, "I must speak to you about Gutierrez." Fantastic as it all seemed at the moment, Olsen had enough good judgment to realize that it was a human being and not a monster he was dealing with. "Well, I'm listening," he said. Ichthyander scrambled into the boat, sat down cross-legged in the bows and crossed his paws on his chest. "Why, it's goggles he's got on," Olsen thought, after a good look at the stranger's face. "My name's Ichthyander. I got a necklace for you from the sea bottom once. But then you had a man's eyes and hands." Ichthyander smiled and shook his frog-like paws. "Gloves," he said briefly. "That's what I thought." From the shelter of some rocks on the shore, the curious Indians watched them speak, though no words carried across to them. "Do you love Gutierrez?" Ichthyander asked after a short pause. "Yes," Olsen said simply. Ichthyander heaved a deep sigh. "Does she love you?" "She loves me too. But doesn't she love me?" "That's her business." Olsen shrugged his shoulders. "How do you mean?" "Why, she's your bride." Though Olsen looked surprised, he still retained his calm. "No, she's not. You're lying." Ichthyander flared up. "I myself heard a swarthy man on horseback call her a bride." "My bride?" Ichthyander was confused. No, the swarthy man had not said that Gutierrez was Olsen's bride. But surely a young girl like Gutierrez could not be the bride of that dark-faced ugly old man? Surely that could not be so? The swarthy man must be her relative. Ichthyander decided to try another tack. "What were you doing here? Pearl diving?" "I must confess I don't like your questions," Olsen said morosely. "Had I not known a little about you from Gutierrez, I should have pushed you off the boat, and that's that. And keep your hand from your knife. I can smash your head with an oar before you so much as raise your hand. But I don't see why I shouldn't tell you that I was indeed looking for a pearl." "The big pearl that I threw into the sea? Gutierrez told you about it?" Olsen nodded. Ichthyander exulted. "There you are. Why, I told her you wouldn't refuse it. I said she should take it and give it to you. She refused point blank, and now you're looking for it." "Yes, because now it belongs to the ocean, not you. If I find it, I'll owe it only to myself." "Do you love pearls that much?" "I'm no woman to love. Eat trinkets," retorted Olsen. "But you can, what's the word now? Yes, sell it, get lots of money for it." Olsen nodded again. "So you love money? What are you trying to get at?" Olsen asked, somewhat annoyed. "I must know what Gutierrez made you a present of her pearls for. You were going to marry her, weren't you?" "No, I wasn't," said Olsen. "Even if I was, it's too late anyway. She is already married." The blood drained from Ichthyander's face. "Surely not to that swarthy one," was all he could say. "Yes, she has married Pedro Zarita. But I thought she loved me," Ichthyander said softly. Olsen was looking at him sympathetically as he lighted up his short pipe. "Yes, I think she loved you. But you jumped into the sea before her very eyes and drowned, or at least that was what she thought." Ichthyander looked up at Olsen in amazement. It was true, he had never told Gutierrez he could live underwater. But it had never entered his head that she could take his leap for suicide. "I saw her last night," went on Olsen. "Your death has upset her terribly. She was to blame for it," she said. "But why did she have to marry another one so soon?" I saved her life." "Yes, I did. For a long time I thought she looked like the girl I had pulled out of the sea once. I brought her ashore and hid myself behind some rocks. Then that dark-skinned fellow came. I knew him at the first glance and tried to convince her it was he who had saved her life. Gutierrez spoke to me about it, Olsen said. She couldn't quite make her mind up who it was had saved her, Zarita or a strange creature that she had seen for a fleeting moment when coming to. Why didn't you tell her it was you? It's embarrassing to speak about oneself. Besides, I wasn't sure at first, in fact until I saw Zarita. But how could she agree? Ichthyandr asked. That I don't know myself, Olsen said slowly. Please tell me all you know, will you? I work at a button factory as a shell examiner. That's where I got to. No, Gutierrez. She used to bring shells, her father sent her when he was busy. We got friendly. Sometimes we met in the port and went for walks along the shore. Then she told me about her ill luck, a rich Spaniard wooing her. The same one? Zarita? That's right, Zarita. Gutierrez's father, the Indian Baltasar, was all in favor and was doing his best to talk her into marrying him, the princely suitor. What's so princely about him? Why, he's so old, ugly, foul-smelling. Ichthyandr could not contain himself. For Baltasar, Zarita was about the best son-in-law he could wish for. All the more so because Baltasar was head and ears in Zarita's debt. Zarita could ruin him just like that, if Gutierrez did not see reason. Just imagine what it was like for her, Zarita's advances on the one hand, her father's nagging on the other. Why didn't Gutierrez send him packing? Why didn't you give him a hiding, you, so big and strong? Olsen smiled at this outburst, but it left him wondering. Ichthyandr was not a fool, yet his questions were strange somehow. Where had he been brought up? That's more easily said than done, Olsen replied. Zarita and Baltasar would have had the law and the police and the courts on their side. In short, I couldn't. But that didn't explain things for Ichthyandr. Well then, why didn't she run away? He asked. That would have been easier, of course. Indeed, that was what she wanted to do, and I promised her my help. As a matter of fact, I'd meant to go up to North America for quite some time, so I told her she could join me and welcome. Did you intend to marry her? Ichthyandr asked. A queer chap you are, Olsen said and smiled again. Didn't I tell you we were just friends? What could have happened afterwards I don't know. Why didn't you go then? Because we hadn't the money for the fare. Is a passage by the Horrocks really so expensive? The Horrocks, my foot. The liner's for the millionaires. Why, man, are you straight from the moon or what? Ichthyandr flushed in embarrassment and thought he would try and ask no more questions that could show Olsen his ignorance. We didn't have enough money for a freight boat, let alone the Horrocks. And we had to have a little above that to tide us over the first days on arrival. Jobs are not to be got for the asking up there any more than here. Ichthyandr had another question coming, but he desisted. It was then that Gutierrez decided to sell her pearl necklace. If only I had known. Ichthyandr exclaimed, remembering about the pearls he had stored underwater. What about? Never mind. Please go on, Olsen. Everything was ready for the flight. Wait a minute. And me? I mean, how could that be? Does that mean she wanted to leave me too? All this began before you turned up. But then, as far as I know, she meant to let you into it. Perhaps even to invite you to go away with her. Finally, she could have written to you later, if she wasn't able to speak to you before she went away. But why with you, not with me? It's always you, speaking to you, going away with you. She had known me for over a year, whereas you. Please go on, don't mind me. Well, as I said, everything was ready, Olsen went on. But then you went and jumped into the sea before her very eyes in Zarita's presence. Early next morning I dropped in to see Gutierrez before my shift. It wasn't my first visit. Baltasar didn't seem to mind. Maybe because he respected the size of my fists, maybe because I looked a good standing, in case Zarita cooled off. At any rate, Baltasar made no trouble and only begged us to keep well apart in Zarita's presence. Of course the old Indian had no inkling of our plan. That morning I was there to tell Gutierrez that I had got 2 fares and that she was to be ready to leave by 10 that night. Baltasar met me, in a state of agitation. Gutierrez is not in. She's away for good, he told me. Half an hour ago Zarita drove up in a brand new gleaming car. Fancy that, he went on. A car's something we never see in our street, specially pulled up slap in front of your own door. Gutierrez and I ran out. Zarita was already out of the car, inviting Gutierrez for a ride to the market and back. He knows that's the time she goes there. Gutierrez looked at the flashy thing. You can understand, I suppose, what an attraction it is for a young girl. But Gutierrez is as sly and distrustful as they make him. She says no politely. Never seen anybody so stubborn as that girl, he exclaimed in anger, but then began laughing. Zarita was smart though. You're being shy, he says, let me help you. And he grabbed her and pulled her in, and she had only time to shout father once and they were off. I don't think they'll ever come back. Zarita's taken her home, if you ask me. Baltasar finished his story, and I could easily see that he had enjoyed telling it. Your daughter's been taken away by force under your very eyes, and you stand there and tell me it all like a huge joke. I told Baltasar with indignation. Why should I worry? Baltasar looked surprised. Had it been anybody else, yes. But Zarita, I've known him for ages. If a skinflint like him could cough up enough money to buy a car, why, he's dead set on Gutierrez and no mistake. He'll marry her as sure as eggs is eggs. That'll teach her to be stubborn. Should know a good chance when she sees it. There's nothing for her to weep about. Zarita owns a hacienda, called Dolores, just outside the town of Parana. His mother lives up there. 10 to 1 it's there he's taken my Gutierrez to. And you didn't give Baltasar a thrashing? Asked Ichthyender. To hear you I should do nothing else but go about beating people up, said Olsen. I did have a mind to give him a good drubbing though. But then I thought better of it. I thought things could be remedied yet. I won't go into all details. Anyhow, as I told you, I managed to see Gutierrez. At the Hacienda Dolores? Yes. And you didn't kill Zarita and set Gutierrez free? Now I should be murdering people as well. Who'd think you were so bloodthirsty? Team not, Ichthyender exclaimed, tears welling up in his eyes. But this is enough to make one's blood boil. Olsen was sorry for Ichthyender. You're right, said Olsen. Zarita and Baltasar are a pair of rascals. They do deserve a thorough beating. But life's more complicated than you apparently think it is. You see, Gutierrez refused to run away from Zarita. What? Refused? Ichthyender could not believe his ears. Yes. But why? For one thing, she's convinced that you took your own life because of her. She's taken your death very hard. She must have loved you, poor thing. My life's over now, Olsen, she told me. There's nothing I want now. I don't care for anything. I was in a haze when the priest Zarita had invited Wa.'s performing the wedding ceremony. Nothing is done without God's will, he said, putting the wedding ring on my finger. And what God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. I'll be unhappy with Zarita, but I'm afraid of drawing God's wrath down on me. I won't leave him. What nonsense. God indeed. Father says God is old wives' tales. Ichthyender said hotly. Surely you could have talked her out of it? Unfortunately, it's an old wives' tale that Gutierrez believes. The missionaries made a devout Catholic of her. I tried my best to show it up for what it was and couldn't. She even said she'd never see me again if I went on abusing God and the Holy Catholic Church in her presence. So I had to ease down. And at the hacienda I had no time to go deeper into it anyway. Just enough to exchange a few words. But there's something else she told me. When the wedding was over, Zarita said with a guffaw, well, one thing's taken care of. The little bird's caught and locked up, now's the turn for the little fish. He then explained to Gutierrez and she to me, what little fish he meant. He said he was going to Buenos Aires to catch the sea devil and make Gutierrez a millionaire's wife. You are not that sea devil, by any chance, are you? You stay underwater for hours, you scare pearl divers. Caution prevented Ichthyender from letting Olsen into his secret. Not that he could have explained it anyway. So leaving Olsen's question unanswered, he himself asked, what does he want him for? Pedro intends to make the sea devil pearl dive for him. If you are that sea devil, take care. Thanks for the warning, said the amphibian. Now Ichthyender had not the slightest idea that on and off he had been headline news in Buenos Aires. I can't, Ichthyender said passionately. I must see her, even if it's the last time. The town of Parana, you said? Yes, I know it. It's up the river Parana. But how do I find the Hacienda Dolores? Olsen explained. Ichthyender gave Olsen's hand a firm shake. I must apologize. I came to see an enemy and found a friend. Goodbye. I'm off to see Gutierrez. Straight away? Olsen was smiling. Yes, not losing a minute, Ichthyender replied, jumping overboard and swimming shorewards. Olsen only shook his head. Part 2. On the way. Dear, preparations for the journey did not take long. He collected his town suit and shoes, strapped them to his body with the leather belt he carried his knife on, put on his goggles and gloves and set out. In the Rio de la Plata numerous anchored craft lay in his path, pygmy steam tugs darting in and out. From below the tugs looked like so many water bugs scuttling here and there. Round him a thin-trunked submarine forest of anchor chains and buoy ropes strained up to the oil-filmed surface from a floor that was copiously littered with heaps of spilt coal and dumped slag, lengths of worn hose, pieces of sail, discarded tins, bricks, broken bottles, and closer inshore dead dogs and cats. The sun was still up, but down here a gray-brown twilight reigned unchallenged. The river Parana discharged its waters into the Gulf, heavily laden with sediment. Ichthyander could easily have lost his way in the thicket of chains and ropes but for the guiding current of the inflowing river. It's amazing how untidy people are, he thought, running a fastidious eye over the seafloor, which looked like one huge rubbish dump. As he swam towards the head of the Gulf, just under the ship's keels, breathing became gradually harder, as for a man in a sealed-up room. On his way he saw a few corpses. One of them, which he passed quite close, had a smashed head and a length of rope weighted with a stone round the neck. Somebody's crime was buried here. Ichthyander put on speed, wishing to leave the gruesome sight well behind. But the higher up the Gulf he penetrated, the stronger was the oncoming current. There were currents in the ocean too, but he knew how to put them to use, much as the sailor puts to use a fair wind. Here there was only one current, and that was in the wrong direction. It couldn't hold back an excellent swimmer like Ichthyander, but it slowed down his progress enough to irritate him. Suddenly something heavy hurtled down past him, almost brushing his side. A ship's anchor had been dropped. "Oh ho," thought Ichthyander, "this seems a dangerous place to swim in," and he looked round him. A big steamer was coming up from behind. Ichthyander went lower, and when the ship's hull was passing above him he clutched at her keel. Colonies of barnacles had formed a rough layer on the steel plates, just allowing him to get a grip. Suspended from the ship's keel in a way not exactly comfortable, he was at least out of danger, and being carried upstream at a reasonable speed. The ship was now going up the river itself. Ichthyander breathed heavily in the water thick with silt. His arms were getting quite numb, but he was lost to part with the ship. What a pity I couldn't take leading along, he thought, remembering the dolphin. He had been obliged to discard his original plan. Leading could not have made the whole trip underwater, while Ichthyander would have been afraid to surface in a heavily navigated river. Ichthyander was finding it increasingly hard to keep his hold, his arms were so numb. Besides, he suffered pangs of hunger, he had had nothing to eat for hours. Deciding he should make a break, he released his grip and sank onto the riverbed. In the deepening twilight Ichthyander examined the silty bottom, but he could find neither flounder nor oyster shells. What fish darted about near him were of fresh water species that he did not know. After several unsuccessful attempts to catch one, he decided they were much more cunning than their seawater kin. Only when night descended and the fish went to sleep did Ichthyander manage to catch a big pike. Its flesh was tough and tasted of silt, but the famished amphibian ate with relish, swallowing its bones and all. Then he thought he would rest a bit. The one advantage of being in a river was that he could at least snatch a few hours of quiet sleep, with no thought of prying sharks or octopuses. He only had to make sure the current did not drag him downstream in his sleep. Ichthyander piled up a few big stones into a rough groin and settled down in the lee of it, his arm anchored round one of the stones. However, his sleep was short. He felt the approach of a vessel, opened his eyes and saw the signal lights. The vessel was coming upstream. The amphibian quickly went up and prepared to cling on. But this time it was a motorboat with a bottom as smooth as glass, so after a few attempts which nearly carried him against the screw, Ichthyander gave up, and it wasn't until a few boats had gone downstream that he at last managed to cling fast to a steamship going upriver. In this way Ichthyander reached the town of Parana. The first lap of his journey was over, but the most difficult part of it overland was still ahead. Early the next morning Ichthyander swam away from the noisy harbor, found a stretch of river bank with no sign of life in sight and scrambled ashore. He buried his goggles and gloves on the beach, then dried his suit in the sun and put it on. The crumpled suit made him look like a tramp, but that didn't bother him. Setting out along the right bank, as told by Olsen, Ichthyander kept asking the fishermen he met the way to the Hacienda Dolores owned by Pedro Zurita. The fishermen eyed him suspiciously and shook their heads. Hour after hour went by, the heat mounted, but he was as uncertain of his way as when he had set out in the morning. On land Ichthyander had no way of finding his bearings in unknown surroundings. Besides, his head swam with the heat and he was finding it more and more difficult to concentrate. From time to time he took a dip in the river to refresh himself. Finally, when it wanted only a few minutes to 4 in the afternoon, he happened upon an old peasant, a farm laborer by his looks. After listening to Ichthyandr he nodded. Go straight along that road, between the fields, he told him. When you reach a big pond, cross the bridge, top a little hill and there you are, there'll be your Dofia Dolores La Mostaja for you. Why Mostaja? Dolores is a hacienda, isn't it? That's right, but the old mistress of the hacienda is also called Dolores. Pedro's her son, a fat old woman with a big mustache. But don't you think of hiring yourself out to her. She'll eat you raw, suit and all. A regular virago, she is. Zarita's brought home a young wife, they say. Her mother-in-law. Make it hard for her, the garrulous old man said. That must be Gutierrez, thought Ichthyandr. Is it far? He asked. You'll get there by the fall of evening, the old man said, having consulted the sun. Thanking him, Ichthyandr hurried on along the road past the fields of wheat and maize, past lush pastures with flocks of grazing sheep. The many hours' tramp had begun to tell on his strength. The road stretched ahead in an endless white ribbon. His lips were parched, but look as he would he could not see water anywhere round. He heartily wished he were in sight of that pond at last. He strained to go quicker, his face was drawn and his breathing labored. Then that pain in his sides began. He was hungry, too. But there was nothing near the road he could dine off. The sheep grazing on a pasture nearby were guarded by a shepherd and his dogs. Branches of peach and orange trees laden with ripe fruit were just visible above a stone wall. This wasn't the ocean. Here everything was somebody's property. Everything was divided, fenced off and guarded. The birds alone were nobody's, flitting and trilling overhead. But try and catch them. And then, was he allowed to catch them? Perhaps they too belonged to somebody? Here on land one could die of hunger and thirst in the middle of orchards, ponds and herds. A fat man in a white cap and a white tunic with bright buttons, a revolver holster at his belt, his hands clasped behind his back, was coming towards Ichthyandr. Can you tell me how far it is to the Hacienda Dolores? Asked Ichthyandr. The fat man eyed him suspiciously. What do you want there? Where have you come from? Buenos Aires. The fat man's eyes became alert. I must see someone there, Ichthyandr added. Hold out your hands, said the man. This request somewhat surprised Ichthyandr, but, unsuspectingly, he held out his hands. The fat man quickly produced a pair of handcuffs from his pocket. The next Ichthyandr knew they were clicked around his wrists. There, the fat man muttered, and, giving Ichthyandr a push, rapped out, Come along. I'll take you to the Hacienda Dolores. But what have you put these things on my hands for? Ichthyandr asked, staring in bewilderment at the handcuffs. None of your lips. Move on, snapped the man in the tunic. Ichthyandr hung his head and shuffled on. Well, at least he hadn't been turned back, but he had no idea what was going to befall him. He did not know that the previous night a farm nearby had been burgled and a man murdered and that the police were looking for the criminals. Nor did he realize that in his crumpled suit he looked very suspicious. His vague answers clinched a case against him. The policeman was taking Ichthyandr to the nearest village to have him transported to the town of Parana. One thing Ichthyandr did realize. He was no longer free to go on with his journey. And he resolved to make a bid for freedom at the first chance that presented. Hugely pleased with his good luck, the fat policeman lighted up a long cigar and walking closely behind Ichthyandr, started puffing out cloud after cloud of acrid smoke. Ichthyandr was suffering torture. Would you mind not smoking, please? Find it difficult to breathe. Turning, he said to his escort. What? Stop smoking? That's a good one. The policeman guffawed, his whole face gathering up in wrinkles. Delicate, are you? And, puffing out a cloud of smoke straight into Ichthyandr's face, he barked, On with you. The amphibian did as he was told. At last the pond with its narrow bridge came into view and Ichthyandr involuntarily quickened pace. Not so fast, you'll see your Dolores soon enough, the fat man cried. They stepped onto the bridge. When they were halfway across, Ichthyandr suddenly bent over the rail and threw himself into the water. That was about the last thing the policeman could have expected from a man in manacles. But what the policeman did next was a complete surprise for Ichthyandr too. Afraid his prisoner might drown, in his charge, and manacled, with all sorts of possible unpleasant consequences, he jumped in after him. Indeed, he was so quick in doing this that he managed to get a grip on Ichthyandr's hair and hold it. Then, risking his scalp, Ichthyander dragged the policeman bottomwards. Presently his hair was released. Ichthyander swam to the side and popped his head above the surface to see whether the policeman had come up. He had and was treading water, looking round. "You'll get drowned, damn you. Swim over here," the policeman yelled, spotting his prisoner's head. Not a bad idea this, Ichthyander thought, and crying out, "Help! Help!" he sank to the bottom. From down there he watched the policeman dive for him several times. At last, having lost all hope, the policeman scrambled ashore. "He'll go away now," thought Ichthyander. But the policeman didn't. He seemed to have decided to wait by the corpse for the arrival of the investigating authorities. The fact that the corpse was lying somewhere on the bottom of the pond did not alter anything. A peasant riding a mule laden with sacks appeared on the road. The policeman ordered the peasant to dump his sacks and take a note to the nearest police station. Things were taking a bad turn for Ichthyander. To top it all, there were leeches in the pond. They stuck to his body in swarms, and soon he was fighting a losing battle, tearing them desperately off as they came in ever-increasing numbers, yet anxious to limit movement lest a stir in the water should attract the policeman's attention. In half an hour the peasant was back. He waved his hand in the direction of the road, heaved his sacks and hurried on his way. In still another 5 minutes a trio of policemen put in an appearance, 2 of them carrying a light boat on their heads, while the third had the oars and a boat hook. The boat was lowered onto the water, 2 policemen got in and the dragging started. Not that that bothered Ichthyander much at first. It was child's play for him, just keeping moving from one place to another. The dragging round the bridge was thorough but unsuccessful. The policeman who had arrested Ichthyander was throwing his arms about in a gesture of surprise. That even provided a spot of fun for Ichthyander, but not for long. The policemen had stirred up clouds of silt with their boat hook. The water thick with it, Ichthyander could not see anything at arm's length, and that was dangerous. And what was even worse, he could hardly breathe with all the silt raised. With his breathing more and more labored, and the irritation in his gills more and more acute, he felt he could not bear it any longer. He groaned. A few bubbles escaped his mouth. What could he do? He had to come up, there was nothing for it. He had to come up, whatever risk was involved. They would seize him, of course, perhaps beat him up. He didn't care. Ichthyander staggered for the bank and put his head out of the water. In the boat a police man gave a hoarse yell, jumped overboard and made a flat out for the bank. His companion had dropped down on his belly and was crying, "Justice, Maria y Jose," over and over. The 2 policemen on the bank were saying prayers, ashen with fright, trembling, trying to hide one behind the other. Ichthyander had not expected anything like that and was quite taken aback for a moment. Then he remembered the proverbial superstitiousness of the Spaniard. So the policemen thought he was an apparition from the other world, did they? Well, he would scare them a little more. Baring his teeth and rolling his eyes, he howled horribly and slowly strode up the bank into the road and away along it, walking at a deliberately measured pace. None of the policemen made a move to stop him. Their sense of duty had battled with and lost to their superstitious awe. "That's him." Dolores Pedro Zorita's mother was a stout, doughy old woman with a hooked nose, a jutting chin and a thick mustache that added up to produce an odd, almost forbidding effect. The latter adornment, so rare with her sex, had earned her the nickname of Dofia Dolores La Mostaja, by which she was known throughout the locality. When Pedro brought his young bride to her, she had greeted the girl with an unceremonious stare. Dolores had an eye only for deficiencies. The girl's beauty struck her, but it was like her not to show it in any way and to decide later, over her pots and pans, that that was just what was wrong with the girl. "A tasty dish," she said that day, alone with her son, and shook her head, "much too tasty," and, after a sigh, "see you don't run into trouble with a beauty like that for a wife. I wish you'd married a Spanish girl." She paused, then added, "Haughty, too. And her hands, why, she won't do a stroke of work about the house with those soft hands of hers." "We'll break her to it," Pedro said and bent over his accounts. Dolores yawned and, leaving Pedro to his work, went out into the garden, cool with the evening. She was fond of sitting in the moonlit mimosa-scented garden, all by herself, dreaming. She went past a border of lilies gleaming white in the moonlight, past whispering laurel bushes, to a bank overgrown with myrtles, let herself down onto it and was soon lost in her dreams. In them she was buying a neighbor out of his farm, building new sheds and outhouses, breeding flocks of fine fleece sheep. Pest on you, the old woman cried angrily, slapping her cheek. Those mosquitoes won't leave a body in peace for a moment. Clouds had banked the skies and the garden was dark. Against the darker sky a bluish band low on the horizon, the glow of the lights of the town of Pirana gained in lightness. Suddenly, above the low stone fence, she spotted a man's head. A pair of manacled hands were lifted into view and the man eased himself carefully over the fence. The old woman shuddered with terror. An escaped convict in her garden. She wanted to cry out but couldn't, tried to get up and run but her legs buckled under her. From her bank, spellbound, she watched the stranger. Meanwhile he had made his way cautiously among the bushes to the house and was stealing from window to window, peering in. Then she heard him, or was she mistaken, call softly, "Gutierrez." "That's your beauty for you," she thought. "That's the type she goes about with. Wouldn't be surprised if she murdered me and Pedro, burgled the place and made away with that convict of hers." A feeling of gloating jousted for Gutierrez seized the old woman. Her strength recovered, she jumped up and waddled quickly inside. "Quick," Dolores whispered to her son. "There's a convict in our garden. He's calling for Gutierrez." Pedro rushed out as though the house were on fire, seized a spade lying by the garden path and ran round the corner. Standing at the wall and peering into a window was a stranger in a crumpled suit, his hands manacled. "Damn you," Zarita muttered and brought his spade down on the crown of the man's head. The man fell as though cut down. "That's done for him," Zarita said in a low voice. "It has indeed," Dolores, who had caught up with him, agreed in a tone she would have used if her son had squashed a scorpion. Zarita looked at his mother. "Where shall we take him to?" "The pond," the old woman indicated. "It's deep. He'll come to the surface. We'll weigh him. Hold on a second." Dolores ran inside and searched feverishly for a sack to put the dead man in. But she had sent all her sacks to the mill with wheat that morning. So she took a pillowcase and a length of string. "There are no sacks," she told her son. "Here, put some stones in the cure and tie it up to his handcuffs." Zarita nodded, heaved the body on his back and dragged it to a small pond in the back of the garden. "Mind the blood," Dolores whispered to him, waddling behind, pillowcase and string in hand. "You wash it away," Pedro replied, putting the man's head down, however, so that the blood would spill on the ground. At the pond Zarita quickly stuffed the pillowcase with stones, tied it securely to the young man's hands and shoved the body into the water. "I must change." Pedro glanced up at the sky. "It's going to rain. By the morning there won't be a trace of blood on the grass." "Wah, tea about the pond, won't the water turn red?" asked Dolores. "No, not in a running water pond." "Oh, to hell with it," growled Zarita and shook his fist in the direction of the house. "There's your beauty for you," the old woman was saying in a whining voice as she followed her son towards the house. Gutierrez had been given a room in the attic. That night she could not go to sleep, what with the stuffiness, stinging mosquitoes and the cheerless thoughts that crowded her mind. The memory of Ichthyander still came between her and her sleep. Her husband she did not love. Her mother-in-law she detested, yet here she was sharing their roof with them. Gutierrez thought she heard Ichthyander's voice calling her. A noise like muffled voices floated up to her window. She listened but heard nothing. Towards dawn she decided that she was not to fall asleep that night at all. She went out into the garden. The sun was not up yet. The garden lay in front of her, wrapped in pre-dawn haze. The clouds had been chased away and heavy drops of dew sparkled in the grass and on the trees. In her light gown, barefoot, Gutierrez was walking over the grass. Suddenly she stopped short. In the walk, outside her window, the sand was blood-stained. A blood-stained spade was lying nearby. A crime had been committed that night. Or was there some other explanation for these bloodstains? Involuntarily Gutierrez followed the track which led her to the pond. Suppose the key to the crime is hidden in the pond, she thought, peering, scared, into the greenish water. Down there, in that murky water, looking straight at her was Ichthyander's face. There was a wound near the temple. The face expressed suffering mingled with happiness. Could she have gone mad? Gutierrez wanted to run away, but she couldn't. Nor could she tear her eyes away from Ichthyander's face. Meanwhile Ichthyander's face was slowly coming up, till, with a soft ripple, it was clear of the water. Ichthyander stretched his manacled hands towards Gutierrez and smiled wanly. "Gutierrez," he said, "my dearest." At last, but he did not finish. Clutching at her head Gutierrez was crying. "Be gone. Begone, unlucky ghost. I know you're dead. Why should you appear to me? No, no, Gutierrez, I'm not dead, the ghost hastened to reply. I didn't drown. Forgive me. There are things you don't know about me. Why didn't I tell you? Oh, don't go away, listen to me. I'm alive. Here, touch my hands. He was stretching his hands towards her. She kept staring at him. Don't be afraid, I'm alive. I can live underwater. I'm not like other people. I can live underwater. I didn't drown that time I jumped into the sea. I did it because it was difficult for me to breathe on land. Ichthyander swayed, then went on, as hastily and as disjointedly as before. I've been looking for you, Gutierrez. Last night your husband struck me on the head when I was standing outside your window and then threw me into the pond. In the water I came to. I managed to get that stone-weighted sack off, but I couldn't. Here Ichthyander showed up the handcuffs, these. Gutierrez was almost convinced now. But why are your hands manacled? I'll tell you about it later. Come away with me, Gutierrez. We'll hide at my father's, nobody can find us there. And we'll be together. Feel my hands, Gutierrez. Olson told me people call me the sea devil, but I'm human. Why are you afraid of me? Covered with silt from head to foot, Ichthyander waded out of the pond and sank wearily onto the grass. Gutierrez bent over him and took him by the hand. My poor boy, she said. What a pleasant rendezvous. A mocking voice suddenly came to them. They looked round and saw Zarita standing nearby. Zarita, like Gutierrez, had not been able to sleep a wink that night. He had come into the garden, attracted by Gutierrez's cry, and had heard all that had followed. When Pedro realized that the sea devil he had been so long trying to catch was at arm's length from him, he thanked his lucky stars and decided to take Ichthyander to the jellyfish there and then. But then he had second thoughts. I don't think you'll be able to carry Gutierrez to Dr. Salvatore. She's my wife, you know. Besides, you're wanted by the police. But I've done nothing wrong, the young man cried. People who've done nothing wrong are not issued with nice little bracelets like those. And as you're now in my hands, I feel it's only my duty to hand you over to the police. Surely you are not going to do that? Gutierrez asked her husband indignantly. My duty points that way, Pedro said, shrugging his shoulders. Nice thing that'd be, cut in Dolores, who had just appeared on the scene, letting loose a convict. And what for? For prying in another man's garden and looking for a chance to carry away his wife? Gutierrez went across to her husband, took hold of his hands and said gently. Let him go, please, I've done you no wrong. Dolores shook her head vigorously, afraid her son would give in. Don't listen to her, Pedro, she shouted. I can't resist a woman's entreaty, Zarita said urbanely. I'll do as you wish. Hardly married and already tied to her apron strings, the old woman said grumpily. Wait a minute, mother. We'll file your handcuffs, my young fellow, rig you up in something decent and take you on board the jellyfish. When we're in the Rio de la Plata you can jump overboard wherever you please. But I will only let you go on one condition. You must forget Gutierrez. And Gutierrez, I'll take you along, as well. You'll be safer with me. You're better than I thought you were, Gutierrez said sincerely. Zarita gave a complacent twirl to his mustache and bowed to his wife. Dolores knew her son well enough to guess that he was planning something nasty. But, to play his game, she went on grumbling, tied to her apron strings, that's what you are. Well, you deserve all you'll get.